Eleanor. Morning, everybody. Hi. So, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm humbled and honored to be here. I have an urge. Before we start, if you don't mind, we'll just take 30 seconds. The way I like to start meetings in the university, I always feel that my body has arrived, but my mind is wandering all over the place. Right? So how about if we try to bring our bodies and minds in the same place, in the same room, perhaps with an intention of why we're all here and what we want to achieve at the end of this week. So maybe just 15, 20 seconds, any way you like it, just bring your bodies and your minds together and just, bring that stillness in yourself, the clarity, the sense of compassion, and the sense of purpose. Okay. Once again, Eleanor, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a very special event in the university. I was just talking to our friend Cormac there, and Cormac mentioned to me that this is one of the most special events that the university hosts. Cormac goes to most of the events in the university, and he said, although it's hard work, it's the most rewarding work and it's humbling. And I say the same thing for the university. We are really humbled, honored to have you here. So, welcome to NUI Galway. Those of you who are not from NUI Galway, even those who are from Galway, welcome to the university. Welcome to Galway and welcome to Ireland for those of you who are not from Ireland. We're delighted to have you here. As Eleanor mentioned, this is the world's largest disability law summer school, focusing on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is the 10th year of the summer school, which is a huge achievement and a lot of work that goes on behind the scene, and also everybody who participates contributes to the success of the summer school. Just to say something about the university, we're on the north end of the university. It's a beautiful campus, it's a beautiful university, and it's about a little over 170 years old. Amazing place. It's an incredible community of about 18,000 students and about 2,500 staff, faculty members. And we are in a very small city of about 70,000 people. So this city itself is a university town, if you were to use the American language in that sense. I was actually smiling to myself because this is supposed to be a summer school, but I don't see the summer outside. I think it left us behind maybe a week ago. But at least, look, the warmth is here, and I think this is really the most important thing. So it's great to see the gathering of everybody here, all the participants, the activists, the civil society, people, NGOs, policymakers, academics, everybody here coming together with a goal to discuss and share ideas and make progress. In my mind, I think this is where the real dialogue takes place. This is where the real synergy takes place, and this is where the real impact takes place. So again, we are delighted to have you here. I'm also a researcher myself. By my research is in biochemistry, and I'm always interested in how like-minded people with similar purpose can come together to make the society a better place, not just for ourselves, but for everybody and for the future generations. I think this is what this summer school is trying to achieve. So in the research and innovation domain, which is where one of my roles in the university is, we focus on 3 pillars in the university. One is purpose, second is place, and third is people. And we try to remind ourselves what is the purpose of us coming to the university, serving the community, serving the broader region and nation and beyond that. But I think in the context of this summer school, the purpose is very clear. You're all aligned towards bringing greater justice for everybody and bringing more clarity and more rights to everybody. And the people you're working for, working with, and the community you're building is absolutely admirable. Now, we also in the university really appreciate and admire the work done by Eleanor and the team in the Center for Disability Law and Policy. I think this is a very special place in the university, and we appreciate the contribution the group is making, and hosting of an event like this is very special for us. I'm also grateful to all the colleagues who have helped organize this event. I haven't met Laura Sarah, but I'm assuming she's also a key player. Hi, Laura. And the colleagues in the school and the college and the university and everybody for hosting such an impressive gathering of very wonderful minds and people here. So with that, I would like to welcome you all and wish you all this week and hope you have a great, successful week. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lokesh. So I'm back again. For those of you who don't know me, didn't introduce myself during the housekeeping, so I better do that. I'm Eleanor, and I'm the director of the Centre for Disability Law and Policy here at NUI Galway, and the co-director with my colleague Lara of this year's summer school. So here we are. I like to think of this week as being that Galway for a week every June is the centre of the disability rights universe. Just a week after many of the people in this room were at the Conference of States Parties in New York, which I'm proud to say for the first time at summer school I can finally say that Ireland was represented at the Conference of States Parties because we have now ratified the UN Convention. But let's not get too complacent about it because we all know there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and ratification is not the end of the journey, just the beginning. It's great to see everybody here. It's not easy getting you all to Galway. As some of you know, many of my colleagues have spent long hours talking to airlines and transport providers and hotels and making sure everyone got here safely, and they've done an incredible job. We have over 220 participants from over 50 countries, so it's a really impressively diverse group that we have here today. And it's great to see old friends and make new ones. Throughout the week, I hope that we'll be swapping stories, we'll be hearing about the struggles at the grassroots in all of your countries and getting updates. So as we go throughout the week, we'll be hearing about, oh, did you hear about this judgment that passed? Did you hear, has this bill entered Parliament? And let me tell you about this protest that we organised. So all of these kinds of actions are really, really important, and it's so heartening to hear about all the progress in different parts of the world. I think we do need to congratulate each other on the progress that's being made, even though, as I mentioned, for Ireland, we know that there is still so much to do, but we do have to celebrate the achievements, and this week is partly about that, taking a breath and then moving forward. So it's been 10 years. How much has changed in the world since we started the summer school in 2005? There's actually been a few years where we didn't have a summer school. When we started the summer school, there wasn't even a convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. There wasn't a special rapporteur on the rights of persons with disabilities. There wasn't a UN committee on the rights of persons with disabilities. So we have all these things now, and I'm very proud to say also that we have, as a result of the elections that took place at the Conference of States Parties, we are finally restoring some of the gender balance to the committee. I'm sure it was lonely, Theresia, to be the only woman leading a group of men, although not surprising. And I'm delighted particularly that our friend and colleague Rosemary Caius has been elected as a member of the committee. And Rosemary is a fond favourite of many of us here at the summer school and is a regular participant in the summer school faculty here. So we're really, really proud, Rosemary, that you've been elected, and you really, really deserve it. So congratulations to you. Also, I think it's important to reflect on what we heard from the UN Secretary General at the Conference of States Parties last week. He talked about how upholding the full human rights of all people with disabilities is a moral imperative and a practical necessity. We will never create peaceful and prosperous societies if we marginalise more than 1 billion people around the world. That is 1 billion people with disabilities. And he also announced his support for an action plan to mainstream the rights of persons with disabilities across the UN system. And our special rapporteur, Catalina Devandas, has said that she thinks this could be the most important turning point in the UN system since the adoption of the convention. I think it's a development that we certainly want to keep an eye on and want to be able to contribute to as much as we can. So with those, I suppose, ideas in mind about progress in the world and how far we've come, and how far we've come in the summer school as well, you'll notice on your programme that we do have a special event to celebrate the anniversary of the summer school on Thursday in a different part of campus, which we're going to introduce you to. So that'll take place in the Bailey Allen Hall on Thursday, and we'll guide you to that event. So I won't say too much about the 10 years now, I'll save it for then. But it is important. And I also won't talk too much about the theme of intersectionality this year, because my colleague Laura will introduce you to that and explain why we chose that theme for this year and what we hope it means. What I will do now then is just tell you a little bit more about the centre for those of you who don't know about our work or are here for the first time. So obviously we're a university centre, and I like to think of ourselves as a location for research, education and advocacy, all geared towards social change. So I think that's our goal. We don't want to be just an ivory tower, just academics locked up in their offices reading books and thinking deep thoughts. We want to be out there, part of the community and part of the world, and engaging with everybody who is on the grassroots, in our context, fighting the good fight for the rights of people with disabilities. So in terms of our education, that's a core focus, and that's part of why you're all here today at the summer school. But we also have two other very strong education programs that I want to briefly mention. So one is a master's program, Master's in Law, and LLM in International Comparative Disability Law. And we are the only such program in the world. And we have many of our graduates in very important positions, and some of them are here today and will be with us throughout the week. And that's really heartening to see. So if any of you are interested in furthering your education in the sphere of disability rights, I would really encourage you to think about applying for the master's programme. It runs for full-time from September for 1 year, or you can do it part-time over 2 years. And we do take people who come from a non-law background. I think when people hear that it's a master's in law, you might assume that it's only for lawyers, but we take people who have significant experience in disability rights, regardless of whether or not they actually have a law degree. So if you want to know more about it, we do have some information out in the foyer at the tables where you registered, so you can find out more there or talk to one of the volunteers. We also have a very strong PhD programme. And our Masters and PhD students are also volunteering throughout the week. So if you're interested in either of those opportunities, you've got a good chance to talk to people and find out what it's really like. I might tell you all the great things about it, and you might hear the real story from them, what it's really like. But I'm very proud that we have such an international and diverse group of students, graduate students at the both Masters and PhD level. And it's a real strength to our community here in the university, and particularly for us here at the centre. In terms of our research for social change, we have a number of projects ongoing. A lot of our projects relate to ideas around legal capacity, access to justice and independent living. So some of you might be familiar with the Voices project that we run here at the centre that myself and Laura and Cliona work on, and that's a project to explore the lived experience of people with disabilities and people who have been denied the opportunity to exercise their legal capacity or to have their rights respected under the law. That project is now coming to its final few months, and across that project we've put together people who have that direct lived experience and people who have a different kind of experience. It might be an experience of research, it might be experience of practice, and together we've formed 14 pairs who have written their experience together, both the lived experience and the reflection on that experience, in an edited collection that will be published by Routledge next month. And you've also got a flyer for that book in your packs if you're interested in getting a hold of it. And for those of you who are based in Ireland or interested in coming back, we'll be launching the book in October, on the 24th of October, and we're also running an exhibition all that week with the images and some artefacts from the participants in the Irish Centre, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. One of our other projects, which we run in collaboration with the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, is about deprivation of liberty and about disability-specific forms of deprivation of liberty. It's a global study, and my colleague Maria Gomez, who's here this week, is also working with us on that project. So in that project, we're looking at how is it that people with disabilities at a much higher proportion than others end up deprived of their liberty in different contexts. It might be in a psychiatric facility, it might be in a nursing home, it might be in a social care institution. Why does this happen to people with disabilities? And how can we stop it? And how can we respond to people in a different way that doesn't involve refusing to recognise their rights, essentially? So as part of that project, we're doing fieldwork in 5 countries now, in France, in Jordan, in Indonesia, in Peru, and in Ghana. And so those of you who come from those contexts or are familiar with them might be interested in talking to us more throughout the week about what's happening on the ground. We would really appreciate that. The final project I want to briefly mention is called DARE, Disability Action, Advocacy and Research for Europe. And this is a Marie Curie network of PhD students, which we have just been, in the last few weeks, successful in receiving funding for. So as part of that project, we'll be hiring 15 PhD students across lots of different European countries to work on different issues around the rights of people with disabilities. And indeed, some of the projects are actually explicitly focused on intersectionality. We have projects on women with disabilities, and projects on children's experiences, projects on older people with disabilities experiences, and projects on social movements and how they can be more inclusive and intersectional. So if you're interested in finding out more, and you might even be interested in applying for one of the PhD positions in that project, talk to us during the week more about that. Finally, then, I just want to mention our advocacy work. So you might think that advocacy sounds like a strange thing for researchers and academics in university to be doing. Surely we should just be providing the evidence-based and leaving the advocacy to much more seasoned activists. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we have a more indirect role. So, for example, our centre supports a group called the National Platform of Self-Advocates, which is a group of people with intellectual disabilities who have set up their own organisation to advocate for their own rights. And in that context, we are just the background team. We just provide administrative and logistical support, but the platform do their own advocacy. But in other contexts, we have been more, I suppose, directly involved in advocacy. So as part of the work on the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act in Ireland, I worked with a group of individuals and organisations who campaigned for a more human rights respectful law. And in that sense, that was my first experience of that more direct advocacy role, where we actually were talking to politicians, trying to get them to change their mind, writing amendments to the legislation and trying to convince individual parliamentarians to enter them for us. And that was a really interesting experience, and one that I really cherished. And I think it's really important that as activists, as academics rather, we don't feel like we should stay away from activism. We have the academic freedom to engage in the world and use our research as much as we can, and I think we should take that opportunity. So for me, it's been really important to work in a place that facilitates that kind of approach, and that doesn't frown upon people using their research for activist ends. When I first started here almost 10 years ago, I couldn't believe that such a place existed. I couldn't believe, first of all, that I got a job that was about my PhD research, because my PhD was in disability rights. I couldn't believe that there was a whole centre where everyone there was working on disability rights, where they were connected to grassroots advocates in the community, connected to people internationally. People I had only read and written about and dreamed about in writing my thesis were now real life human beings I could talk to. And things like summer school is actually a great way to do that as well. There are a lot of people here who have a lot of experience, and it's really important that you do get up the courage to go and talk to people about their work when you find connections and want to work together or are interested in finding out more about what they do. So for me, I think what we do at the centre is the perfect blend of activism and academia. And I'm proud to call myself an activist academic. And I hope that we will continue that tradition throughout the week of engaging in not just deep thinking about the ideas that should change the world, but actually figuring out the strategies for how to achieve them. So with that, I'll hand you over to my colleague Lara Sarah, who's going to introduce you to the theme for this week's summer school.
Hi. You cannot imagine how happy I am to see you all here. This is going to be a fantastic week, I think. First of all, if you are using Twitter, we have our hashtag that is 10DSS, so it's 10 in numbers, DHDSS, because it's the 10th Disability Summer School. Like Eleanor said at the beginning, don't forget the ones who are taking part in the MOOC core competition. Make sure to come back into the auditorium and hear about the mood court for the final session before you split up into the teams. I wanted to thank to all of my colleagues of the CDLP, Sharon, Joe, Mary, Michael, Clina, and Maria, who were crucial, and without them, it wouldn't have been the same. The organization of the event is perfect. And I think that the CDLP also it's a wonderful place that makes things like this possible, but it's because of the people that we are working there. We have a really good group, and it's amazing. Okay, so during this whole week, we will talk about intersectionality, and We will see the confluence in different factors of oppression, such as sexism, ageism, and ableism. We will have the opportunity to start talking what we need at different spaces, such as the UN, the civil society movement, and so on, to go into the right path for social justice. And in this, I think intersectionality is the key, because we can no longer consider that the fight has to be in parallel. We are not alone in the fight for social justice and equality, that's for sure. Intersectionality is a paradigm, a framework that allows us to understand the system of race, social class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, nationality, age, disability are shaping our life experiences. Intersectionality also makes important contributions and connections between knowledge and empowerment. It's a research tool and also an approach to non-discrimination. However, behind the theoretical development, there is a history of struggle, a history that involved years of conversations between activism in their movements and academics. So it's important not to let that the conceptualization and development of the term intersectionalities suppress the fundamental history of activism, especially we have to recognize from the Black feminist thought. So intersectionality, I want to say, it was not on the agenda. I mean, it wasn't not with the name, but was on the agenda even when it doesn't have the title. There are registered here in India and of course in the United States later, but we were talking about in the activism of intersectionality before we give a name. So I think that is why during this whole week we have to honor all the history behind it, all the history behind the struggle of intersectionality. We have to honor the activism behind it. So I think that you have to try to exchange as much as possible all the knowledge between you and the speakers. I think it's important if you can do networking. The CDLP and the summer school of the CRP has one of the best things that it gathers people from around the world all together in one whole week. But I think this summer school this particular year has also people from different social groups. And I think that is very important. We cannot keep talking about with a specific topic. It's better if we are all together and we can help each other. So take that, I think, as an advantage. I just wanted to share that. And now I have the honor to present Teresia Dagener, that I really admire. She was a big help for me during my thesis. So Teresia, as you may know, is the chair of the CRPD committee. She will finish very soon, but she did an amazing work. And also she is a professor of the Protestant University of Bochum. So Teresia, welcome and thank you. Thank you all.
Dear friends and colleagues, dear participants of the 10th International Disability Law Summer School Galway, it is an honor to deliver the keynote address to this year's International Disability Law Summer School in Galway. I had the honor to be involved in some of these summer schools, and I must say that each and every summer school I attended had been the annual academic highlight of my life. My best scientific ideas were influenced by what I had heard in Galway, or by whom I had met in Galway. I tell all my researchers in the Bochum Disability Studies Center bodies and all my students that the participation in at least one International Disability Law Summer School in Galway is a must. So I deliver this keynote in deep appreciation and respect for the inventors and founders of this summer school. Jared Quinn had a good nose when he started it. The 10th International Disability Law Summer School coincides with the 10th anniversary of the entering into force of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this year we also celebrate the 10th year of the CRPD committee. So many reasons to celebrate. And again, the organizers of this year's summer school, Eleanor Flynn and Maria Laura Serra had a good sense of what brings us forward in implementing the CRPD. Intersectionality in the area of gender, old age, and childhood must be addressed. This is a subject on the horizon of international disability law which needs attention and has been ignored for far too long. Before I enter into the subject matter of my presentation, I need to say a few words about the 11th Conference of State Parties to the CRPD in New York, which just ended, and many of us there in the room, and here in the room, attended as well. I need to tell you how relieved I am about the results of the election, which took place on Tuesday, 12 June 2018. Among the 9 candidates elected for the next term of the committee, 6 women, among who 5 identify as disabled women, were elected. This is a great step forward and brings a taste of gender balance to the committee, in which I had been the only woman among 18 experts for the last 2 years. Among these 6 women is, as Eleanor has already pointed out, Rosemary Kayes from Australia, one of the most eminent international disability law scholars, who is also here with us today. Knowing that she will be there when my mandate as a committee member and chair ends on the 31st December 2018 is such a relief, because the legal knowledge needed for the committee will be there. I congratulate her and all other newly elected and re-elected experts. I wish you the best of luck for the coming 4 years. I'm of course equally delighted about the election of former member of the committee, Anna Palas, to the CEDAW committee. For the first time in 36 years, a disabled woman from the disability community has been elected as expert. This is another milestone in the mainstreaming of disability into the UN human rights system. In the next minutes, I wish to talk about 3 points. First, I will highlight some issues in relation to the areas of intersectionality chosen for this summer school: gender, old age, and childhood from the committee's jurisprudence. Secondly, I would like to talk about inclusive equality as a new equality model introduced to international law by our recently adopted General Comment number 6 on Article 5 CRPD, which deals with equality and non-discrimination. And finally, I would like to outline the importance of inclusive equality for intersectionality. My first point: intersectionality in the area of gender, old age, and childhood from a CRPD perspective. The CRPD is the first international human rights treaty with an explicit reference to multiple discrimination as it affects disabled women and girls. Article 6 of the Convention recognizes that women and girls with disabilities are subject to multiple discrimination and demands from state parties to take all appropriate measures to ensure their full development, advancement, and empowerment. Also, children with disabilities have their standalone article. Article 7 demands that state parties combat discrimination against disabled children, apply the principle of the best interest of the child, and ensure that the voices of disabled children are expressed and are recognized. Disabled persons of old age did not get their own standalone article. This is one of the most serious gaps of the Convention, and as Jared Crane has pointed out immediately after the adoption in 2006, it's one of the most serious gaps of the Convention. It is due to the fact that during the negotiations of the treaty, older disabled persons did not have a strong enough lobby. Maybe recognition of older persons with disabilities in the CRPD would have prevented the discussion about the need for a human rights convention for persons of old age. At least, it would have given guidance for developing a human rights standard in this regard. The adopted text of the CRPD refers to older disabled persons only in 2 places. Article 25 on the right to health demands age-sensitive health services, for disabled children and older persons, and Article 28 on adequate standard of living and social protection emphasizes the need for access to social protection and poverty reduction programs for older persons with disabilities. Many more references can be found relating to children and women with disabilities throughout the whole convention, in various substantive articles in areas such as awareness raising, access to justice, violence, education, employment, and more. Multiple discrimination is further recognized in the preamble of the convention in paragraph P, where multiple or aggravated forms of discrimination is recognized with respect to race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, indigenous, or social origin, property, birth, age, or other status. Intersectionality as a term does not appear in the text. It is, however, addressed in the jurisprudence of the committee, most notably in General Comment number 3 on disabled women. Thus, a textual analysis of the convention leads to the conclusion that multiple discrimination of disabled persons is acknowledged with respect to various layers of identity. However, there is a clear hierarchy in terms of categorization. Multiple discrimination at the intersection of disability and gender and at the intersection of disability and childhood are more prominently recognized than any other intersectional discrimination. Now, the question is whether this hierarchy is also reflected in the committee's jurisprudence. Unfortunately, the answer is yes. From the 67 concluding observations the committee has adopted within its first decade so far, only 9 refer to older persons with disabilities, whereas all 67 concluding observations mention disabled women and disabled children. The same hierarchy can be seen in the committee's general comments. In 2016, the committee adopted General Comment number 3 on women and girls with disabilities, and in the same year, disabled children were extensively addressed in General Comment number 4 on inclusive education. There's no general comment on older disabled persons yet, nor has it been discussed within this committee so far. Older persons with disabilities are mentioned only twice in the committee's 2009 reporting guidelines on initial state party reports with respect to social protection and health. The guidelines for the periodic reports that were adopted in 2016 on the basis of an in-depth analysis of the first 5 years' jurisprudence still entail only 4 references to old persons with disabilities in the same areas: social protection, poverty, and health. So what did the committee achieve in relation to intersectionality? As an achievement, we can note that discrimination at the intersection of gender and disability and childhood and disability have been addressed in all dialogues with state parties so far. The areas addressed are far-reaching and cover almost all substantive articles, as well as statistics and data collection. Further, the committee developed the definition of multiple and intersectional discrimination, as I said in General Comment number 3. Multiple discrimination is described as compound or aggravated discrimination on more than one ground. Intersectional discrimination is defined as referring to a situation where several grounds operate and interact with each other at the same time in such a way that they are inseparable. Women with disabilities, says General Comment number 3, and I quote, are not a homogeneous group. They include indigenous women, refugee, migrant, asylum seeker, international displaced women, women in detention, women living in poverty, women from different ethnic, religious, and racial backgrounds, women with multiple disabilities and high levels of support, women with other identities as in and lesbian, bisexual, transgender women, and intersex persons. So you see that the list has been expanded. I come to my second point, inclusive equality as the new model on the horizon. At its 19th session in spring 2018, the committee adopted General Comment Number 6 on equality and non-discrimination, as enshrined in Article 5 CRPD. As most of you will know, the purpose of a general comment is to clarify the normative content of legal provisions, the state party obligations which arise from them, and give guidance on how to implement these obligations at the national level. General Comment Number 6 seeks to achieve all this, and in addition, it introduces a new model of equality into international law and links it to the human rights model of disability, which has been the anchor of the committee's jurisprudence for the last 8 years. Now, what is the human rights model of disability? What is inclusive equality, and why is it important for intersectionality? The human rights model of disability is an improvement of the social model of disability, which has been developed as a critique to the medical model of disability. During the negotiations of the CRPD, the social model of disability was held up as the guiding star. However, the adopted convention is based on much more than the social model of disability. It is based on the human rights model of disability, which differs from the social model of disability in various ways. Most importantly, the human rights model embraces disability as part of humanity, and it connects equality with dignity and freedom. It also recognizes that disability is only one layer of identity, and that intersectional discrimination needs to be taken into account when we want to protect and promote human rights effectively. The social model of disability says that disability is a social construct. The human rights model of disability says that society needs to be transformed in order to become inclusive. General Comment Number 6 says, I quote, "Individual or medical models of disability prevented the application of the equality principle to persons with disabilities. Under the medical model of disability, persons with disabilities are not recognized as right holders but are instead reduced to their impairment. Under these models, discriminatory or differential treatment against persons with disabilities is seen as the norm and is legitimized by a medically driven capacity approach to disability. The human rights model of disability recognizes that disability is a social construct, and impairment must not be taken as a legitimate ground for the denial or restriction of human rights. It acknowledges that disability is one of several layers of identity. Hence, disability laws and policies must take the diversity of persons with disabilities into account. It also recognizes that human rights are interdependent, interrelated, and indivisible." End of quote. Inclusive equality is introduced as a new model of equality that corresponds to the human rights model of disability. It is described as embracing the substantive model of equality and extending it in 4 dimensions. 1, there is a fair redistributive dimension to address socioeconomic disadvantages. 2, a recognition dimension to combat stigma, stereotyping, prejudice, and violence. 3, a participative dimension to reaffirm the social nature of people as members of social groups and the full recognition of humanity through inclusion in society. And 4, an accommodating dimension to make space for difference as a matter of human dignity. It is almost identical with a model developed by Sandra Fredman called Transformative Equality Model. The committee adopted the content of Fredman's model and developed it further. Inclusive equality was found to be the more appropriate term than transformative equality because it was felt that the latter could be misunderstood as structural adjustment. Structural adjustment policies were the central component of development policies in the 1980s. introduced by the financial institutions of the United Nations and reinvented 10 years ago by the EU as a response to the financial crisis. These policies usually undermine economic, social, and cultural rights in developing countries, led to more civil conflicts and more repression of human rights. While transformative equality as developed by Friedman could never be misunderstood in this way, the committee felt that the terminology was less clear than the term inclusive equality. I come to my third and last point, inclusive equality and intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw, the mother of the concept of intersectionality, recently was asked in an interview to define the concept of intersectionality once again, and she said, I quote, "I think of intersectionality as a term that captures the fact that systems of oppressions are not singular. They overlap and intersect in the same way that power does. Many of us now would say, yes, of course, to that observation. But as far as prevailing practices in law and many other disciplines concerned, racism was analyzed as separate and distinct from patriarchy, which in turn was framed as a separate from class oppression. As a consequence, the understanding of any of these systems is rendered incomplete if little attention is paid to the ways in which subgroups within large groups experience subordinating structure." End of quote. She went on to explain the relationship between the identities and structures, and I quote again. "Some talk about intersectionality solely as a marker of multiple identities, and others talk about intersectionality solely in terms of structures. The point is that structures are made legible through their impact on particular people, and particular people are situated within these structures in marginalized and subordinated ways because of who they are seen to be. They are not separate in a way that allows you to talk only in terms of identity or only in terms of structures." End of quote. Inclusive equality as a model of equality helps us to understand this interrelation between identities and structures. Inclusive equality recognizes disabled persons as individuals and as members of a social group. And to recognize disability as an identity marker means to acknowledge that each and every person with a disability gets a say in how to deal with the difference disability makes. That's what reasonable accommodation is all about. It makes room for individual needs based on autonomous decisions. Denial of reasonable accommodation is a form of discrimination, unless accompanied by undue burden. The right to be protected against denial of reasonable accommodation is a right to inclusive equality as it pertains to individuals. In contrast, the right to accessibility is a group-oriented right. The duty to provide accessible physical environments, accessible information and communication, and accessible transportation is group-oriented because the standard for accessibility have to be negotiated with representative organizations of disabled persons. Hence, groups of disabled persons get to say what is required to provide accessibility for blind, deaf, mobility impaired, intellectually impaired persons, or persons with psychosocial impairment or disability. Accessibility duties are transformative obligations. They tackle inaccessible structures of society. Of course, intersectionality has to be taken into account in relation to both duties. The individual-oriented duty to provide reasonable accommodation as well as the group-oriented duty to provide accessibility. So far, we have defined accessibility mostly from a male and adult perspective of an individual with physical, intellectual, sensory, or psychosocial impairment. What is a gender-sensitive, child and old age-friendly, accessible environment? We are only beginning to understand it now. Disability is only one layer of identity, and disabled persons are not a homogeneous group, neither in terms of impairment nor in terms of any other identity marker, such as gender or age. The debate around intersectionality has taught us that it is important to leave no one behind and critically reflect on who gets to participate in the implementation and monitoring of human rights. The CRPD's inclusive equality model is further reflected in Article 4.3 and 33.3, which demand that representative organizations of disabled persons have to be meaningfully involved and consulted. The committee is currently working on draft General Comment number 7 on the participation of persons with disabilities, including children with disabilities, in the implementation and the monitoring of the Convention through their representative organization. Intersectionality is also an issue in this process, as we have just seen at the 11th Conference of State Parties, where we held the General Day of Discussion. Among the pending issues is whether the LGBTI community will be embraced or excluded in this general comment. Sexual orientation and gender identity have been addressed in the committee's jurisprudence, but there has also been some drawbacks in recent sessions. As you might have noticed, the 5 references to sexual orientation and gender identity in the draft General Comment number 6 on inclusive equality, released to the public on August 31 of 2017, were changed and even eliminated in the text of the General Comment number 6 adopted in March 2018, which included the reference to sexual orientation and gender identity only once. This step back in relation to LGBTI persons is the result of an ongoing discussion within the CRPD committee. Takes place at a time when the human rights system, including Human Rights Council and other human rights treaty bodies, are moving forward to more inclusion of sexual orientation and gender identity in their views and resolutions. It is my sincere hope that the new members of the committee, whose term will begin in 2019, will follow that path. Inclusive equality can only be achieved if we leave no one behind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Theresia, for that. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Mary Keogh, who's the Director of Disability Inclusive Development Initiative with CBM International, who's going to respond to Theresia's presentation.
Thank you, Maylene, for putting on my microphone, and thank you, Eleanor. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the summer school. I'm really glad to be back. I think, a yearly visitor at this stage, if even only for a short while. And I'm particularly glad to be here on the year that Ireland has finally ratified the CRPD. I think it's been a source of contention and embarrassment as somebody who works in international development to sit with many of the countries that we work with who've ratified the CRPD well in advance of Ireland. So I think I'm glad that we're finally catching up in this respect. So I'm going to try and give a response to Theresia. Interestingly enough, Theresia and I wrote our papers separately, but they actually converge, which I'm happy to say. So I will be giving a response to the key issues that Theresia has raised. And I suppose, in general, when I reflect back on intersectionality, because it's one of those terms that's very much in the narrative at the moment, and when I was doing my thesis, my poor husband was subjected to it for 5 years of speaking about intersectionality. And then he came home one day and said to me, "Mary, I heard somebody on the street talk about intersectionality." So I thought, oh, it's managed to move from an academic perspective into people standing at bus stops, which I'm thinking that's actually quite an achievement, but probably still in the sense of, well, actually, what does that mean? So I'm not going to go into the details of what intersectionality means, because I believe you have a session on that in the morning, and I certainly don't want to preempt that discussion. But I thought what I would share is, I suppose, my own experience, which brought me to intersectionality in my research. And then I might just share 5 key areas, which all actually converge with what Teresa has raised in her opening address, on why intersectionality is positive and important for disability. And then I might just do a small bit of a reflection in terms of, I suppose, the key 5 areas that I see of where intersectionality aligns exactly with the work that we do in international development. So that's going to be broadly what I speak about. So when it came to myself and intersectionality, my thesis, my PhD focused on mainstream disability and bilateral development. And development is such a huge area and is usually broken down into thematic areas, whether it's gender, whether it's HIV, AIDS, children, youth. It's growing and growing now. But back then when I was doing it, and this was I think now 8 years ago at this stage, or 7 years ago, disability was beginning to emerge as an issue in development. And it was built on the work of all the previous, like Finland and the US, who'd kind of driven development and disability as a key area. But when I started to do my research, I thought, let's talk also with the gender advisors. Let's also talk with the HIV/AIDS advisors. And let's see if there's a crossover disability. I don't want to just speak to the disability focal points, because generally the disability focal points were sitting in an office with a small team that had very little kind of sanctions that they could do if disability wasn't integrated into development programs. So I think what really struck me and what was very striking was, in talking to gender advisors, there was very little crossover around disability, whether it was men or women with disabilities. It really wasn't thought about. And the same with HIV/AIDS. And I remember thinking, wow, these are the key areas of development at that stage, HIV/AIDS and gender. And neither of them are actually thinking from a disability perspective. And equally, the disability advisors were not necessarily thinking from that broader perspective. So that's what brought me to intersectionality, because it brought me to look at, hang on, we need to look at how all of these intersecting identities create disadvantage. And that if our development work doesn't approach that, and if our processes for development don't include that, well then we are only going to have so much of a success in terms of bringing development. And it's quite obvious from the MDGs and from various different development processes before the Sustainable Development Goals that we saw that siloed thinking. But not to be negative, because I do think it's actually changing. We are now in a space where those intersections are beginning to be realised. So maybe just to share, I suppose, 5 key points around why intersectionality is positive for disability. First of all, as Teresa alluded to in her presentation, the CRPD really looked at multiple discrimination, because it looked at the lives that disabled people live, that we live, and it looked at the different identities that we have. So it looked at kind of the multiple layered identities that a lot are derived from social relations, history, and the operations and structures of power in society. And our experience as individuals in society stems from the historical, the political, and social factors. And intersectionality aims to reveal the multiple identities and expose the different types of discrimination and disadvantage that an individual can face at these crossroads or at these intersections. And this really holds true for disabled people, because historically people with disabilities have been kept invisible within society and disenfranchised from political participation and decision making, and have remained on the periphery of the political marketplace. That is changing now slowly but surely, but the spaces where decisions were being made, people with disabilities were not getting access to. The CRPD recognised that marginalisation and recognised the different layers of identity that can add to that marginalisation. But when we talk about the recognition of multi-layered lives, what do we actually mean by that? Because one of the criticisms of intersectionality is, what does that mean in practice? So I just wanted to give, I suppose, a few things with regard to this first area of multi-layered lives and what it means in terms of our practice as academic and activists. It means that our analysis and actions must engage with complex, messy politics. We can't have conversations around inclusion, equality, and equity if we are not engaging with politics. We have to avoid the neat boxes that we come defined by, or that we actually sometimes define ourselves in. Sometimes we can find it easy to define ourselves within an identity. We need to think about how, when we do that, how we can exclude and break bridges with others. We need to build solidarity across all marginalised groups and minority groups. And we must also ask questions about the role of race, gender, government, and how resources are distributed. Teresa spoke about the redistribution with regard to socioeconomic disadvantage. This is one of the key elements with regard to intersection analysis. The second point then, and Teresa also spoke about, was stigma. And an intersectional approach recognises that groups often experience distinctive forms of stereotyping. And we know that people with disabilities are recognised as one of the groups that face stereotyping and as a result face stigma. In particular, certain members of the disability community who are more at risk of stigma. And this particularly applies to people with mental health, psychosocial disability, intellectual disability. And there is a key challenge that we need to address with regard to that stigma. But again, what does that mean in practice? It means that we must embrace the broad spectrum of human identities and build solidarity with each other. We recognise and acknowledge that in some contexts we may not face stigma because we have a disability, but we might face it because we're a woman or because we have HIV/AIDS. Embracing human identity is happening. The disability movement is moving towards it, but needs to get more on board. And I think Teresa just spoke there about the challenges, particularly with the LGBTQI community. And I know, being involved in Article 6 and the writing of Article 6, the challenges that came up with that. Now, we know that the challenges come from governments, and we know that people who are working in human rights in countries where LGBT rights are under huge threat, it's not necessarily that easy to do, because they face, in many cases, civil or criminal and like horrific human rights abuses. But we do actually have to face up to these things within the disability community and to embrace these identities and embrace these movements. While we need to embrace our identities, we also need to push back against kind of destructive identity politics. And I think that's kind of one of the areas that is really important. The disability movement must become more diverse. There is a criticism, it's not a criticism that's only levelled at disability movements. All movements face this issue, and I think it's one of the things, hopefully, this week when you're discussing around the different intersections between age, between gender, between youth, that it really, you do come up with some solutions, and you do come up with some ways of working forward. It really is not rocket science in that sense. And as the disability movement has the opportunity to actually be very forward thinking in this respect. Also, with regard to kind of the move we normally go to around identity politics, if we move away from it and look at cross movements are stronger, and claims for fairness and equality supported by a wider range of identity groups have much more of an impact than one group looking for a set of rights. And I think, while the challenges with, as we clarify the rights that we have in the CRPD, or we clarify the rights that we have in CEDAW, or we clarify the rights that we have in CRC with regard to different identity groups, the big challenge is to make sure that those rights don't become just from those perspectives, that they're actually the holistic perspective. And I think that's probably one of the challenges that the UN has tried to embrace and continues to embrace. And it's wonderful to see a disabled woman getting elected to the CEDAW committee, because that is where the start of that comes from. And equally, the CRPD committee has been very progressive in terms of working with other UN committees to start looking at this. And I think that's where we really will have impact when that happens. So thirdly then, in terms of intersectionality, I think from the perspective of it moves us from shifting to think from just one single identity. Within the disability sector, within the disability movement, within disability policy makers, we generally kind of tend to look at things through disability lens. And that's a natural default because there's a whole system built up with that, and it's our bread and butter in that sense. But we really need to start pushing back around these fixed categories of identities. As Teresa mentioned, we are multi-layered. We have different aspects of our human identity, and that shifting our policy responses really, really needs to focus on that. So, and with that, I think when we move from that kind of very single lens or identity-led approach, it brings us much more into that kind of community and holistic perspective. And also, it also decreases, or it should, or goes some way towards the competition of different groups. So when we look at the redistribution of whether it's resources or the claim for rights, you know, the default to kind of looking at it from one perspective really undermines human rights for all. So Agenda 2030 and the human rights narrative now talks about human rights for all, and really in terms of, I suppose, the current political and economic climates that we all live in and the new changing world order that we are living through on a daily basis. This is when the solidarity and the community focus around human rights for all and intersectionality is key with that. So what does that mean in practice? Well, in practice, that means we need to start building cross-movement campaigns. We need to start looking at those. We need to look, you know, whether you're looking at domestically, you're looking at internationally, we need to look at those hooks that bring us together. I have 2 minutes, I'm nearly there. Fourthly, I think one of the key areas around intersectionality to think about is it recognises that one voice does not represent us all. People with disabilities have always had our voices represented by others. That has changed dramatically with the CRPD and Nothing About Us Without Us. But within the disability community, we need to be so careful that we're not one voice for all, because we're not. It's not inclusive enough to say that, and we need to look at how to reorganise how we do this as a community and as a movement. Fifth and lastly, with regard to intersectionality, and of course I don't have much time to speak about this, but is the issue of power. If we don't address the issue of power imbalances, we can come at inclusion and equality from a range of different perspectives. But if we're not tackling head on where the decisions are being made, where the money is being distributed, where the accountability is had, well then we're going to have a very limited effect in terms of our work on inclusion and equality. So lastly then, in terms of the key elements, because I do actually think when I'm reflecting a lot on intersectionality these days, and unfortunately working full-time in development now, I don't get the time to sit back and think about it, but I do think about it in terms of the work that I do. And there's 5 key areas. Again, they're the key areas I spoke about, but one is recognising diversity. Number 2 is acknowledging and addressing stereotypes. Number 3 is moving beyond singular focus into that broader focus of equality and human rights for all. Number 4 is recognising the role of representation. To me, that's the most important, because representation is who we are, and if our voices are not reflected by who we are, I think, well then the challenge really is there. Now that doesn't mean others can't speak from the disability perspective. Yes, we do, and we need those allies, but it is again linked to that 5th piece, which is power. Where does the power reside? And to me, intersectionality is about giving voice to those with lived experiences. So the challenge for the week is, for everybody, while you're having the theoretical and practical conversations around intersectionality, is it needs to come to life. It needs to move from practice, and it needs to move into daily life. It needs to move into how we interact with people and the humanity that we have for people. And it needs to address the power imbalances.